We're going to be covering when to eat and also what to eat within 24-hour periods as well as over a year. Not just to maximize your wellness and how you feel and look, but how to maximize your overall longevity. I'm going to talk about some of my protocols as well that I've developed over the last 20 years being a researcher in this area and what works for me and what might work for you.
Dr. David Sinclair shares insights on fasting and time-restricted eating, emphasizing their role in boosting health and longevity. He highlights how these practices help with weight management, disease prevention, and aging, drawing from his own protocols and research. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos.
Eat less often. That is the one thing that will have the biggest impact on your longevity based on all the science we'll talk about today.
Okay. And this doesn't mean eat fewer calories necessarily. It can, and that's good.
Yes.
That's good. But a lot of people struggle to do that, to eat fewer calories.
Well, it comes naturally. If you're down to one meal a day, which I am now, you shed weight and then you get your 20-year-old body back. That's a nice bonus. But then you maintain that weight. You have a larger dinner, which is what I do to make sure I'm not becoming malnourished. Clearly, we're not talking about malnutrition or starvation here. It's about packing your calories into a shorter period of time.
Sinclair emphasizes the importance of not just what we eat, but also when we eat. He believes that intermittent fasting and restricting eating to shorter periods within a day have the most significant impact on longevity.
Not just about the period of eating, it's the period of not eating that's so important for boosting the body's defenses against aging to maximize longevity. And we'll talk about how that actually works in a minute. But you can still have a large body and fast and get the benefits. In my lab, we've looked at mice that are obese and tricked them into thinking that they're fasted, and they live just as long as a skinny mouse. So really it's about getting your body into this state of defense at any weight.
His core message is to eat less often, stating that reducing the frequency of meals without necessarily cutting calories can promote longevity. Eating one meal a day, as he does, helps shed weight and maintain it.
Body weights, waist to height ratios that are optimal for humans is about 0.5. But yeah, losing weight is helpful. We're not fat shaming anybody, but we're going through the science. This podcast is about what the science says, not what's socially acceptable. And it is true that if you're leaner, you will live longer. That is a fact. It's not necessary to get benefits by doing what we're going to say. But also, interestingly, as a side effect of eating less often, you will lose weight. I did. I've shed about 15 pounds since the beginning of the pandemic. And I look better, I feel better. And it's a nice side effect. But ultimately, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, these are the kind of things you should consider in your lifestyle. We're going to help you get there. We're going to ease you into it. There are some tricks that make it easier.
While he advocates for eating less frequently, Sinclair stresses that this isn't about malnutrition or starvation, but rather about packing calories into shorter time windows and ensuring nutritional adequacy.
I get questions every day from people, how should I fast? And my first answer is, well, you're an individual, you've got a different lifestyle, different tolerance for pain and hunger. You're a female or a male, you've got different microbiome. These are really important things to take into consideration. When we recommend things, what we're saying is, you can try this. If it doesn't work for you, try something else. We actually have to measure things, get a dashboard on your body to know if what you're doing, whether it's exercise or in this case, your diet and when you eat, is working for you. And that's why I've been able to optimize my diet over the last 20, in fact 30 years. I'm not just guessing.
Sinclair mentions that fasting, especially time-restricted feeding, activates the body's defenses against aging and can extend life. He explains that even those who are overweight can benefit from fasting as it triggers a state of defense in the body.
This is why I have autopilot. I drive a little crazy. I do that with my body as well. It's all an experiment. But let's go through the diets. Okay, so there's a fasting mimicking diet. Volta Longo, a colleague of mine from UCLA, is a proponent of that. That's a diet that lowers mTOR activity. It's low in these branched-chain amino acids that I've mentioned.
Okay, and is that a diet that mimics fasting, or does that include periods of actually not taking in any calories?
It's both, but you don't have to be as rigorous about the period. the food itself will mimic it.
So the food itself is being processed by your body in such a way that the body is like, I could really use a little bit more. Or I could really like a little bit more.
Yeah, you want the body to be in a state of perceived adversity. Oh my goodness, I'm running out of food. I'm not eating meat anymore because plants have less of these amino acids. So it responds to that low amino acid input. Volt has done some great work. Over the last few years, he and his group have shown that on this fasting mimicking diet, which they can send to your home, that actually helps cancer patients survive and get over chemotherapy quicker. Again, more evidence that fasting is good, not just for longevity, but for diseases. So that's one. The next one, let's talk about, which a lot of people call intermittent fasting. We'll just call it fasting. This is a period if you go longer than a day. Some people do 3 days, some people go for a week. I wouldn't go longer than that because then you'll start chewing up your muscle, which you don't want to do. But these long extended periods are doing a real deep cleanse on the body and turning on that autophagy, that process of recycling proteins very deeply, especially once you get beyond the 3-day mark when your metabolism switches into what's called chaperone-mediated autophagy, the deep cleanse. So that's fasting. And then there's time-restricted feeding, which is what I do because I'm not very good at going beyond 24 hours.
Well, I think most people would really, really struggle to get there.
Yeah, time-restricted feeding, which is what I do, which is try not to eat till dinner. That's hard enough.
He highlights the importance of maintaining an optimal body weight, as being overweight accelerates the aging process. A waist-to-height ratio of 0.5 is seen as optimal for humans.
One is that you're going to have glucose attached to proteins that makes them glom up. Think of it like caramelized body parts. This will ultimately lower your longevity, reduce your longevity, give you type 2 diabetes and probably cardiovascular disease on top of that. So that's one, keep those glucose levels down. But also what glucose is going to be doing to you at high levels is shutting off those protective mechanisms. Remember,
he introduces the fasting mimicking diet, which tricks the body into thinking it's fasting, even though calories are still being consumed. This method has shown benefits for cancer patients and others undergoing chemotherapy.
There's, like you say, the experimental, like really interesting, like, wow, that guy's looking really good and he's been fasting sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But then there's these large populations and subgroups of populations all across the world who have fasted as a part of tradition and culture for hundreds, thousands of years. And there's pretty good evidence from these groups as well.
Right. Well, let's name some of them.
The Jains in India.
In India. They're probably the most well-studied group. And that there's scientific evidence that they have the most number of people over 70 in good health than any other religion.
Than any other group in India.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And a lot of people go, oh, well, the Jains are also vegetarian, but lots of people in India are vegetarian. And the Jains are even doing better than them.
Yes. And we'll get to the vegetarian diet and what the science says about that versus a meat-based diet. But there are other religions. Christians fast. There's Ramadan for Muslims. These are not just coincidences. These aren't just religious practices. It's clear that humanity has figured out that you feel better, you look better, you ultimately are disease resistant. You might even help cure diseases by going through these periods of being hungry or at least not having food in your tummy. Why? Because it activates these 3 longevity defenses that we just mentioned.
Now let's get into these really interesting, like sort of gold standard studies. There is one out of the Baylor College of Medicine. It was run by Isa Mendikoglu. This was published just last year, and it showed that fasting from dawn to sunset for 4 weeks improved blood pressure, reduced BMI, decreased waist circumference, and this is the important part, I mean, it's all important, but it upregulated DNA repair proteins. This is what we saw in all these model organisms as well.
Yeah, there are dozens of studies showing that periods of fasting is beneficial to people who are obese, not just because they lose weight, but they turn on their body's defenses. They become more insulin sensitive and their glucose levels come down. Also showing that people of regular weight, like me, can benefit from fasting. There's a number of studies there. And these are all in the show notes if somebody wants to go and check them out. But what's really interesting is that certain diseases, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, even cancer, those diseases seem to also benefit from fasting, including when you combine chemotherapy with fasting. You get this double benefit for many types of cancers.
He mentions various religious fasting practices, for example, Ramadan, and how these traditions, which involve periodic fasting, have been linked to better health and longevity. Sinclair advocates for reducing meat intake, focusing on plant-based foods, which can lower levels of certain amino acids.
A really big study by the Adventist Health Group, 2013.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because what they calculated was the chance of dying based on various diets. And these were thousands of people. And what they found was that what's called the hazard ratio went down the more vegetarian and vegan you were. What does that mean? Your chance of dying goes down. And the number goes from 0 to 1. Whereas 1 is you're pretty likely to die tomorrow. Whereas a low number, which is around 80, means you've got 20% less chance of dying on any given day with this hazard ratio.
He concludes by discussing studies that show plant-based diets and specific lifestyle changes, like the Mediterranean diet with exercise, can slow biological aging, which is measured by new scientific tools. If you found this video informative, make sure to give a like, subscribe, and press the bell icon so that you won't miss out on any future videos.